Hello, welcome back to New to Hill Country podcast. I'm here with Kirk Parsley, the sleep expert. So we're super excited to talk about sleep and all the other cool stuff. I have been actually taking the apple cinnamon flavored Doc Parsley sleep remedy for a month now, and
Oh,
I
you've got
used
to be a
to.
better person by now.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like a better person. I feel like a good person now, not so cranky. But I used to really wake up so much in the middle of the night, just have to go pee and all. But actually, for the last, I don't know, week or so, I have been sleeping through the night, and that's been
Mm,
wonderful. I
mm,
didn't know what it was like to sleep through the night.
mm.
So I'm excited. Before we begin, we will give a shout out to our sponsors. The first one being SPG Texas. It's a premier jiu-jitsu martial arts gym for kids and adults. We're located in New Braunfels, Texas. We have a lot of family members. We already built a really wonderful tribe and community. So if you're interested in starting martial arts or you've been doing it, but you want to have a really good experience of learning and enjoying the community, you should come check it out.
Yep.
And then
And,
the second sponsor, I'll let you
yeah,
do
our other
that.
sponsor is Element, LMNT, electrolyte mix. Been using that now for, I think I'm on 2 years. I've been using it. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Mhm.
And man, that's like, really just clears the brain cobwebs and everything. Like, I don't know. I think just people think most people aren't drinking enough water, period. But then are they drinking something they just probably shouldn't be drinking? I feel like it's like just an amazing way to get your hydration, tastes great. And you just hit the hydration needs on a level that you probably didn't know could be satisfied in that way. You think you've been hydrated, but you really didn't know the difference, and it's something that you have to experience to really get what people are talking about with that. But
Mhm.
yeah, we love the element. We're kind of addicted.
And we
So
love the sleep remedy.
then we love. I'm excited. I'm a big fan of Doc Parsley Sleep Remedy. I've
Yes.
been using it now
Many
for,
months now, yes.
yeah, I don't know if I'm going on a full year of it. I'm probably somewhere about 8 to 9 months, I would guess. I've been using it, and yeah, I love it. I pretty much won't sleep. I mean, like, it's not like I couldn't sleep without it. I can still fall asleep without it. Every now and again, I'll forget to bring a box home from the gym or whatever, and I'll go like a couple days without it. I notice the difference in the quality of my sleep right away.
Mm.
Like, I slept, and I may even not have woken up or anything, but just the extent to which I feel rested when I wake up the next day is just not the same. So thank you, Kirk, for that. And
We can talk a little more about
yeah,
that when
well,
we're
hopefully we'll
talking.
talk about that a little bit more.
Mhm. So let's start with.
Yeah, so let's just start with Kirk. I don't really know exactly kind of much about your background in terms of like how you came to Texas, or if you were always here, or tell us everything that you can.
Man, how did all that slip by?
Yeah.
We've never had that conversation.
I
Unbelievable.
know.
Mm.
That's funny. Yes, so actually, I grew up in Texas. I'm actually a 12th generation Texan, so my family's been
Oh wow.
here kind of
Oh
since
wow.
the beginning.
Mm.
And I grew up like the first half of my childhood in Beaumont and Kemah area, like just basically Houston Ship Channel. And then my mother got remarried and we moved out to Katy, Texas, which was like a kind of like a small rice farming town. Had some suburbs starting to grow there, but it was pretty far outside of the city. We kind of rode dirt bikes everywhere, and drove our jeeps off road, and it was pretty country.
Nice.
And now it's just been swallowed up by Houston by all accounts. It's just like
Mm.
part of the concrete jungle out there. And I haven't been back there in probably 15 years, but last time I went back, I couldn't even find my house because everything had changed so much, and I just couldn't remember enough to figure out where I was. A lot of street names changed, and all the landmarks I used to use were gone, and couldn't remember all the street names. So yeah, that's changed a lot. And then, but of course, I joined the military right out of high school. Actually, dropped out of high school to join the military, and got shipped off at 18 years old. I think I was 18 years and like 17 days old or something, and went off originally to Florida for boot camp, and then Illinois, and then back over to San Diego for the SEAL training, and then spent most of my time back in San Diego. I went to medical school in Bethesda, and that's Maryland and up by DC, and then went back to San Diego from there, and then left the Navy in 2013, and then 2014 I moved back to New Braunfels, where you guys are.
Oh, really?
Lived there for a couple of years, and then moved up to Austin proper about 3 years ago, almost 4. No, I guess 4 years, close to 4 years ago now. Yeah, that's my journey.
Oh, I didn't know you'd lived in New Braunfels at any period. That's interesting.
Yeah. I'm the reason Rob knew about it, because Rob came out to visit me in New Braunfels, and we went around to the grist mill and floated the river and stuff. I think at least went and looked at the floating. I don't remember if we went. I feel like we did, but maybe. And when they started looking, that was he talked to me a lot about that area. I think he was looking between like that and Wimberley or something. So I sold him on New Braunfels.
Nice. Good job.
He sold me on New Braunfels after that. So.
And now he's leaving.
Right,
now he's leaving, yeah.
The ping pong ball that is the Wolf Clan.
Right.
Sure. Yeah. It's all good.
Yeah.
I think they'll be winter Texans. I really foresee that. I think once they, and I don't mean this, I just think when they experience the Montana
winter.
cold,
that Montana winter when they have to shovel the snow off the top of their car.
Right, the long winters that will come. I mean, I'm trying to convince my dad to be a winter Texan all the time, because they're up in Iowa, and I'm always trying to convince them to move down here.
What part of Iowa?
Dubuque, Iowa.
Okay, my dad lives in Waterloo, Iowa.
Okay, yeah, very close. I mean, so actually, the Waterloo Cedar Rapids area was where I was considering putting a gym instead of New Braunfels. I actually not Waterloo Cedar Rapids, fairly close to their Cedar Falls. I was actually looking at Cedar Falls, and it was just honestly too cold. That was like I remember I went there, and I didn't dislike Cedar Falls, but I just remember I hit that area when I was doing my research, and there was just like a horrible cold snap that was coming through, and it was it's cold in Iowa when the Iowans are cold, and they're not like being like, oh yeah, it's like this is no big deal. They're like, oh man, it's really cold today, and it was just like horrible. I remember I was at a restaurant by myself, and they had a whole bunch of bourbons on the menu that I wanted to try, but then there was no way for me to be able to drive back to my hotel, and I was talking to like John Frankel in Korea and over like the phone, and he was like, oh, just sleep in your car, and I was like, dude, I'll die if I sleep in the car tonight. Like, it's that cold. Like, I would never wake up again.
That happens in Alaska all the time. Man.
Right.
People get stranded, try to ride it out in their car. They run out of gas and freeze to death in their car.
Yeah, no, I can that I could acutely imagine.
The coldest I've ever been in my life was actually Chicago, and that's with consideration of me doing a lot of cold weather training and operating in the SEAL teams, and backcountry skiing through Scandinavia and Alaska, and all that stuff. And the coldest I've ever been in Chicago. It's like there's something. That wind was so damn cold. There's the base right there on the lake, and you'd walk outside, and it literally just blew through all your clothes like you were nude. Like it was, it was awful. Every day, I used to walk to the to get breakfast every morning. I walk to the mess hall and I'd be like, I'm not gonna make it. I'm not gonna I didn't know what I thought was gonna happen, but I just I didn't feel like I was gonna make it. Like every day, it's like it's too cold. Something's gonna happen.
No, that cold wind off the lake there is something else. I've felt it. Yeah, it's nasty. It gets right in the bones.
Yeah.
Mm.
So right now you're down in Florida, and it sounded like you're doing some research. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, you know my backstory, and I guess it's what we'll get into it. But I still get a lot of requests from special forces guys and former special forces guys, and they're of course dealing with the sequelae of their chosen profession. Especially after 20, 25, 30 years of that lifestyle and kind of all of the all of the blast related head trauma, as well as like just regular concussive head trauma. And and then of course they have all the other stuff that I worked with them on, with as far as all of their sleep issues and hormonal dysregulation and all of that, which goes hand in hand with the head injuries. And so anyway, I'm involved with a lot of philanthropic organizations that want to give money to former special forces guys to help them, reset and get better for their next career and get whatever treatment they can, exceed obviously what they're going to get in the VA or just traditional healthcare, because it's questionable as to whether it's really disease, and that's what medicine is good at, treating disease, and this is sort of more of a performance issue. And because they're always coming to me and asking me about things, and it's usually something they've studied up on, or one of their friends has done it, or they've tried it themselves, and then they want to know what I think about it, and should we pay for SEALs to go through this. And so I always try to do my due diligence and I do whatever research I can online. I talk to people, and then I usually go down and work with the people who are implementing it, and experience it myself if it's appropriate. So I'm out here in Florida. One of my friends from the Navy he was a Navy dive officer, and he now owns a hyperbarics facility here in Tampa. And we worked out a way to make it somewhat affordable for me. And there is good data to show that hyperbarics can help with brain injuries, brain dysfunction, but nobody knows really how far out, like how acute does it have to be, how severe does it have to be, how long do you need to treat, like what's the best treatment protocol, what is it that's actually changing. A lot of that data isn't there. So I basically just out of interest for the community, really said, well, I'm gonna go down there and I'm gonna go do the treatment myself. And then I'm going to see, and I'm just going to test everything I can think of to test, and I'm going to see what changes. So I'm journaling and doing my subjective experience on it. But I'm doing as much objective stuff as I can as well. So I've done like EEGs and neurocognitive learning and brain. I've done like a PET scan for the brain. I've done genetic aging. I've done a bunch of hormonal inflammation, oxidation metrics in blood, serum labs, DEXA scan for body comp, and then just sort of routine vitals of, weight and blood pressure, heart rate, like all of that stuff, taking all of that every day, logging all my activities and my exercise and my nutrition, and I'm just going to see what I get out of it. I have another SEAL buddy that I went through SEAL training with. He did 30 years in the SEAL teams, or 28 and a half, I think. And he was a combat SEAL up until his retirement. So he has a lot of exposure to all of that. And he's going to come out and he's going to do a different protocol that I'm doing, as far as timing wise, but it's going to be the same number of treatments, and we're going to do all the same testing on him. and we're going to see what he gets. And then if we can prove the concept, then we'll put in for an IRB and try to get some proper research out of it. But for right now, we just need to figure out whether or not it's interesting, and I'm sure it will be.
Okay. Does it feel pretty good? You like doing? I've never done that. I have actually no experience with that at all. So,
I mean, it's kind of dull. I mean, you're just laying in a tube for an hour, listening to air circulate around. But there's definitely a little. I wouldn't go as far as to call it euphoria, but just like, something in that vein, kind of for the first several hours after you get out of there, you just feel sort of really peppy and happy and optimistic and a little more ambitious. And so that's sort of the daily. I just put this big cattle bumper on my truck right before I came out because I've been driving cross country so much. I'm just paranoid of hitting a deer at 80 miles an hour and dying or totaling my truck or whatever. So I put this big bumper on, and as is usually the case when you're doing that, I banged my knuckles all up and had a dozen little cuts across my knuckles, and I just sat there and watched those things disappear in like 3 days. Like I just sit there and just watch them shrink. I could literally tell a difference in the hour that I was in there that they'd gotten smaller. And then it builds up in your system, like the oxygen saturation builds up over the course of the week, and so you get more and more durable effects the longer you do it. And so that's kind of what we're trying to figure out, is sort of like where's the minimal effective dose of that, where's the optimal effective dose of that, and what's reasonable and what's practical, and all that.
Fascinating. Wow.
So actually, this just kind of, we should maybe go back just for people that don't know you, and talk just a little bit about your background and how you came to be where you are today and stuff. So I don't know where you want to jump off into that, but you joined the military, you became a Navy SEAL. I actually don't know the absolute timeline on most of that stuff, so I'll let you take it from there. So.
Yeah, sure. I, as I said earlier, I dropped out of high school and joined the military to be a SEAL. Obviously, I was fortunate enough to make it through SEAL training and become a SEAL, and then so that entire enlistment was like, I don't know, 6 years and some change. It was slightly under 7 years or something. I was in. I was I was dating. So I was a SEAL during the Clinton administration. So this is. Well, I guess we had the first Gulf War while I was in, but my job was primarily training for combat and training other people to train, for combat, and training other special forces with other militaries and so forth, and so I enjoyed my time in the teams, but I just didn't really see that going anywhere. I didn't really think of it as a career, and so thought of it as sort of a young single man's game, and I felt like I was becoming neither. I met a girl and fallen in love, and was thinking about family and kids and all that, and so I got out to go to school. The woman I was dating, who had become my wife, she was in physical therapy school. She's getting her master's in physical therapy when I was dating her, and I used to read her textbooks on deployment because I'm that dorky, and and I loved it, and I thought, well, maybe I can be a physical therapist. To be clear, like, I was pretty sure I was a moron because I'd gotten bad grades my whole life, and when I say I dropped out of high school, like, I wasn't anywhere close to graduating high school when I dropped out. So, I was years away from being able to graduate. And so, I thought, well, that's pretty ambitious, but maybe I could go become a physical therapist or something. And then I started working. You need 2,000 volunteer hours just to apply to physical therapy school.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, well, I better get started on that. So, I had to start at junior college because I didn't even have a high school diploma. So, when I started college, I started volunteering at San Diego Sports Medicine Center, and they pretty quickly they hired me and trained me up to be a physical therapy aide, and I decided pretty quickly that I didn't really think being a physical therapist was right for me. It just just wasn't quite the right match for my interest. But being at that center, I was there with this complete, it was a complete healthcare mecca. I mean, we literally had everything. I mean, we had, massage therapist and podiatrist and sports med and ortho and, you know, MDs, DOs, athletic trainers. We had orthodontists there, of course. So like we literally just had everything you could imagine in healthcare. And, and I worked there 8 hours a day. So I got to know everybody and just got to kind of look at everybody's job. And a couple of the doctors, trying to talk me into becoming a doctor. And I was like, you guys need to pump the brakes. I didn't even graduate high school. I'm not a candidate for medical school. And the head doctor, the guy, Dr. Lee Rice, comes out of the clinic, or comes out of his office. He overhears this conversation, and he goes, "The question isn't whether or not you could get in. The question is, would you go if you got in?" And I was like, damn it, yeah, you're gonna shame me into this. So okay, so I'll apply to medical school. And then interestingly, when I got out of the Navy, Lee Rice owned San Diego Sports Medicine Center, and he was the founder of the Sports Medicine Fellowship, actually, and he was the Chargers doc and the doctor for the Olympic Training Center, like super well known guy, and he owned that center when I was in college, and then when I left and went to medical school and did my time in the Navy and all that, he opened up the first concierge practice in Southern California, and he had this concierge practice, and it was just this really well-known thing, and it was super exclusive, this high-end executive program, and he actually brought me in as his successor to that after I got out of the Navy. Oh, wow. So it was a really cool kind of full circle thing. So anyway, to back up a little, so I went to the military's medical school, did all my training, went to, did my internship there in San Diego. And then I did my, the Navy has this residency in undersea and hyperbaric medicine. It's basically learning how to treat divers for diving injuries and other associated things. And so I did that, and then I went and worked in the Navy as a dive medical officer or undersea medical officer, whatever they want to call them. And then I did a couple of years at one unit, and then I went back to the SEAL teams. And then when I was at the SEAL teams, I had this great background in sports medicine. I figured that's what I was going to do when I got to the SEAL teams. Having been a SEAL, the only time I ever saw a doctor was if I had a sports medicine injury, an orthopedic injury, and everyone I know, that was the only time we saw doctors. So that's what I thought I'd do, and I got back there at this perfect time where they'd just gotten funding. Like any place in the military, it takes 5 to 10 years to get the money for any program you design, and so I got there to coincidentally at the time where they were going to start building this facility. And I'd worked in sports medicine for years, and I'd built a clinic already, and so it was a perfect fit. And they put me in charge of building this clinic, and I was instrumental in hiring our very first athletic trainer, our very first nutritionist, our very first strength and conditioning coach, our very first physical therapist. We built this sports medicine facility. And we got people from, the Olympic Training Center and major universities and professional sports teams. Like, we got the best of the best. And then I was the dumbest guy around, right? Because we'd hired all these super expert people. And then, the way the military works, when you're the dumbest guy, they put you in charge and they tell you to supervise. And so that supervise this clinic. And then, can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I something changed on my computer screen. But my office, I'd built out this facility, and my office was in that facility with all these other sports medicine folks. And all the guys in there getting treatment, they would just slowly drift by my office and come in, close the door behind them, and be like, "Hey, man, can I talk to you about something?" And like, I need to tell you what's going on. Because SEALs are a lot like professional athletes. The worst thing you can do is put them on the bench. And anything is better than not being able to do their job. And so if you have the power to remove them from their job, they aren't going to talk to you. They're going to tell you exactly what they need to tell you to get away. But because I'd been a SEAL, and because I'd been a SEAL recently enough to where there were still, active duty SEALs there that I knew, that I'd trained with and deployed with and all that other stuff. And I had a reasonably good reputation. And so the guys would come in and they'd trust me and they'd say, "Hey, here's what I'm going through." And, they had the same symptoms that they have now. But nobody had heard it before. This is like 2009, and they came in and they were, saying that, they couldn't concentrate, they couldn't focus, they couldn't remember anything. Their motivation was terrible. They were very moody. They're very emotional. They were working. They were eating a perfect diet. They were working out. On a prescriptive workout program designed by our strength and conditioning coaches and trainers, and they were getting fatter and they were getting weaker, and they just couldn't figure it out. And they didn't have a disease though. They just weren't performing to where they felt like they should perform. And they weren't themselves. They weren't who they perceived themselves as being. And there was this disconnect between this meat suit that was performing a certain way and what they thought, who they thought they were, and what it should be able to do and what they should be able to do. And to be honest, I didn't have a clue. I went to Western medical school. I knew how to diagnose and treat diseases. I didn't know anything to do with performance. And so it forced me to do a lot of learning. And the way the SEAL teams work is everything is sort of a word of mouth. And once somebody has good results, they tell their friend and they tell two friends, and it grows exponentially. And pretty rapidly, I'd say within maybe 2 months, I probably had 100 guys come in my office and tell me the same story. And it was so similar that I could have told them the story after the first 30. I could have just said, "Hey, sit right here. Let me tell you what's going on with you." And I remember it so clearly. This guy's mentioning something about sleep, sort of offhanded, and taking Ambien, and it kind of a light bulb went off. I was like, "Man, it sure seems like a lot of guys are taking Ambien." And so I just made a note in the margin and said, "I'll come back and look at that later." And of course, I didn't have any idea of whether or not Ambien could be associated with what they were dealing with, because like every other doctor, I knew nothing about sleep. I never had a single class on sleep in medical school. There wasn't a single board question on sleep, but nobody I knew anything about sleep. I knew what the disease drugs were. I knew how they worked, as far as their molecular action. But I didn't know how they impacted sleep, and I really didn't know what went on during sleep. And, I thought, well, maybe I should look at that. I went back and looked through the notes, and it turned out every single person that I had notes on was taking Ambien. And I thought, oh, well, maybe there's a correlation there, right? So I just had to really start cramming a bunch of learning and figuring out if this could be associated with what these guys are feeling, because I was thinking it was, adrenal fatigue or shell shock or combat fatigue. It's one of these sort of nebulous things that, but it would be great if I could find something that, that I could really grab hold of. And I was doing this full battery of serum tests. It was just a shotgun because I didn't know what I was looking for. So I just basically take it all, take 14 files of blood and just give me every lab value and let me see if I can see any patterns. And, there was a pattern. I mean, these guys looked like, on their labs, they looked like they were 55, 40 pounds overweight, pre-diabetic. And what we call metabolic syndrome, which is sort of like low anabolic hormones combined with prediabetes. And that's what their labs looked like. But yet the guy sitting in front of me was 30 years old with six-pack abs and, didn't make any sense. So, this is all kind of going on at the same time. Fortunately, the SEALs already had somewhat of a celebrity status about them. And I could call, the guy. Like I could read somebody's book or watch somebody lecture, see someone's TED talk, see someone on television. I'm like, hey, I call them and say, hey, I'm really interested in working with you. I'm the doctor for the West Coast SEAL teams. Could I come train with you? Could I consult with you? And every single one of them said yes, and they were all very gracious. And I got to learn a lot really quickly. And there's a scientific concept of Occam's razor where, the solution with the least number of assumptions is most likely to be correct, or in other words, just like the simplest solution is most likely to be the solution. And so, I wasn't naive enough to think that lack of sleep would correct every problem they were having. But it was true that lack of sleep could be causing every problem that they were having, right? Once I learned more and more about sleep. And so I started beating that drum and I started trying to sell that to the community. Now you can imagine, I chose probably the two worst professions for sleep, right? Being a Navy SEAL and being a doctor, like two professions that don't really seem to value sleep. And now here I am telling them that, hey, you know what your big problem is? You guys aren't sleeping enough. You aren't putting enough emphasis on sleep. And they're like, what? That's sleep. That's for cowards and weaklings and, soft people, whatever. It took a while for me to convince, but, all these people who came through to see me, I got them all off of their sleep drugs. And, that's where the supplement came from, because I had to give them something in the place of their sleep drugs. I couldn't just take away their sleep drugs and tell them go sleep, because obviously they couldn't sleep or they would be on sleep drugs. And so we worked all. Really, I owe them. They were instrumental to it. We worked on the formulation together, like what was the right combination of supplements and what concentrations, and got all of them off of sleep drugs. Got them all on some daytime over-the-counter supplements, and I was quadrupling, quintupling their total testosterone levels and dropping their oxidation down 300-400%, dropping their inflammation down 300 or 400%, and improving their insulin sensitivity and all this other stuff. And it was just really through lifestyle. It was primarily around sleep, and then it was around some supplements to encourage rebuilding their hormones, because one of the big things that happens with sleep deprivation is it wrecks all your hormone regulation, and that's the most immediate thing that you're feeling every day when you don't get enough sleep. And after a while, there was enough people who were believers, and they started putting me on stages, pre and post retreats with guys like Rob Wolf, and I met Rob through doing conference, I don't know, whatever they're called, retreats. It's sort of like a conference where they'd have a bunch of lecturers, and Rob and I became friends, and and he dragged me into other sort of opportunities for speaking. And then when I got out of the military, that was just an option for me, was to go around and keep spreading my apple seeds. And so I just ended up becoming this sleep guru, or whatever you want to call me, sleep enthusiast. And now that's what I'm best known for. But of course, when I work with clients, I do everything. I work on overall performance, but I do harp on sleep because I do think it's the most underutilized. And now actually it's much better. Here just 12 years later or something, I think most people have been exposed to hundreds of sound bites about how important sleep is. But if you go back to the memory hole, 10 years ago, that did not exist. Nobody was talking about it. Sleep was still for the weak, and sleep was still a luxury. But it's gaining some traction now, so my job's not so difficult anymore.
I mean, you gave us that we had that seminar with you a few months back, and the biggest takeaway for me was to really get rid of the guilt of sleep,
Right.
having enough sleep, because we're so conditioned, like from early on, that if you sleep in or if you have enough sleep, you're lazy, you're not
Right.
productive, and so
Right.
you always try to almost compete, like I only slept for 3 hours or 4
Right,
hours,
right.
therefore I'm like most productive person in the world. And I grew up in that environment, so it was really big for me to really have that mental shift.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of the emphasis around performance and any westernized civilization where time is money, and achievement is the way to make more money for your time. But those cultures, by and large, the philosophy is, the unspoken philosophy really is that we're going to select out for the winners by seeing who doesn't break, essentially, right? We're just going to keep grinding harder and faster and harder and faster and harder and faster until enough people fall away because they're broken, and then whoever survives is like that's the winner. And that's not a very healthy way to go about life,
Right.
and you aren't necessarily losing the weak people, you're losing people who broke, which there's a fair bit amount of chance, luck, and timing into such a thing. I feel the same way about SEAL training. I mean, 90% of the people who try to be SEALs don't make it through SEAL training, but at least half of those guys would have made really good SEALs. It was just a matter of timing for a lot of those folks. And had they come a year earlier, a year later, they might have been a different story. And I think it seems to be true in everything I've been through. Whether it's academic rigor or physical rigor, it's just I just believe there's a very significant amount of chance and luck involved.
Yeah. Should we go into the questions at this point? I think we have a couple of questions, and
Right.
so
yeah. So there, when you can have that, but we just had a few questions from people here at our gym. Some people I'm sure that you've met. Do you remember Bradley Fainer? Big tall guy.
Of course, I know Big Brad.
Sure. So
he's probably gotten really good now. He's going to beat me up next time I'm there.
He's getting better every day. I'll say that. Like
Yeah.
I can see the time period where I'll be able to submit him just getting narrower and narrower every time. But it's like what is he, probably 6'5", 6'6", 240, something like
He's
that.
a giant.
It's like
He's a big boy, and he's got that youth on his side.
yeah, right. It's like so many of these guys that I'm training where I'm like, I might have to stop teaching you jiu-jitsu here. I don't know. Like I'm taking away the only advantage I have here, but yeah, that's all good. But he had a few questions. One of his questions was, how significantly does eating before bed affect sleep? And if significantly, how long before sleep should your last meal be?
Yeah, that's a really common question I get, and I should probably come up with a panned answer. But the true answer to that is that it really depends. It's really biologically individual. And what I mean by that, say your genetic and your overall health state matters to some degree, but I wouldn't say that's the biggest issue. The biggest issue is just your insulin sensitivity. So Bradley, I don't think needs to worry about when he eats, because he's young and he's fit, and I'm sure his insulin sensitivity is fine, and it doesn't matter. So one of the areas of your brain, I'd say the area of your brain that's the most impacted by sleep and sleep deprivation subsequently, is the prefrontal cortex. And prefrontal cortex, that's our simulator. That's the part of our brain that allows us to be the smartest animal on the planet. It allows us to think through things without actually having to do them to figure out if they're going to work. And as far as we know, we're the only animal on this planet that does that. That we can say, well, I could do this, I could do that, and I could do that. We can compare and contrast those ideas in our head. And that region is responsible for what we call executive functioning, which is, sort of intuitive. What that means is that think of like what a C-level executive would be responsible for, and it's kind of those types of cognitive behaviors, complex problem solving, and planning and scheduling, and all that. And that region of the brain, because our brain is so heavily our brain is so heavily dependent upon glucose. And in fact, if you don't have blood ketones, beta hydroxybutyrate, which would only really come from starving yourself or deliberately being on a keto derivative or ketotic diet, then your brain is really exclusively dependent upon glucose. And because that region of our brain is so important, and it is sampling all of our hormones like all the time, really rapidly, everything floating around our bloodstream, our brain is constantly analyzing. And when there is a significant change in blood glucose, that stimulates that region of our brain that's associated with fight or flight. Now, it doesn't necessarily throw you into fight or flight, but you have to think of it like this. Every mammal on this planet sleeps, and every mammal on this planet uses the sun as its cue as to when to be asleep, when to be awake. Obviously, some are awake at night, and some are awake during the day, so that it can change how they use it, but all animals use that as their cue. The only time that any animal on this planet deprives themselves of sleep, other than humans, we do it to ourselves intentionally. No other animal will do this to themselves intentionally. The only time any other animal will deprive themselves of sleep is if they are starving to death or they're being hunted. So if they're being preyed upon, they will sleep as little as possible, obviously. If they are running out of food, they will wake up earlier, they will stay up later, so that they can travel greater distances and have more opportunity to find some food. By the way, it will also change their brain and cause them to take more risk and try more novel foods because they are starving to death. And our brains do the same thing when we're depleted on that. But the point of it is, if you go to bed and you have whatever your blood glucose level is, it doesn't matter. You could be diabetic and you could have a blood glucose level of 400, and it could go from 400 to 300 really quick. Or it could you could have normal blood glucose and it could go from 90 to 50 really quick. And either way, it's not the absolute number that matters, it's the rate of change that matters. And your brain picks up on that rate of change and says, that blood glucose is dropping too quickly. We must be starving. And it fires off your fight or flight system. Your fight or flight system, that I'm oversimplifying now, but this is the area of the brain that most people have heard of, the amygdala, which is sort of like our alarm sounding system, and then the regions of our these little glands that sit on top of our kidneys. Kidneys are the renal system. These are adrenal. They sit on top of the renal system, and our adrenals secrete stress hormones in response to the brain telling the adrenals that, hey, we've got some stress going on here. We need to prepare ourselves to fight or flee. And so you will actually wake yourself up from stress hormones. Now, stress hormones get a bad rap. They get this rap of, they're like, stress hormones will kill you. Stress hormones are bad for you. Stress hormones will give you a heart attack. Stress hormones make you fat and all this. But stress hormones also keep you alive. Like if you don't have cortisol, you're dead. So your cortisol wakes you up in the morning. So if you don't use an alarm clock to wake up in the morning, you could sleep in a cave in complete darkness, and you would wake up after 8-9 hours of sleep or so. What would wake you up? Well, that would be your stress hormones. So when your stress hormones get to a certain level, that wakes you up automatically. They keep going up till about midday, then they start crashing, and then they start going down. And once they get below that level that wakes you up, and they're lower than that, now you can fall asleep. And then when you're in deep sleep, you have the lowest stress hormones you'll have at any time of your life during deep sleep. and the lowest right when you go to sleep, and then they gradually go up over the night, and then in the morning they wake you up. So you can see that if I'm asleep and I'm in deep sleep and my brain perceives me as starving and it fires my amygdala and it fires my adrenals and I start secreting stress hormones, my stress hormones are going to go high enough to wake me up and I'm going to feel like being awake. And even if it doesn't raise me to the full level of being awake and alert, it will at least raise me to a point where I'm getting poorer quality of sleep, and the quality of sleep matters every bit as much. So that's a circuitous answer, but the answer is insulin sensitivity is what really matters. And so if you have good insulin sensitivity, it probably doesn't matter to you. The only caveat to that is that for complex reasoning, you don't want food in your stomach when you're going to bed, ideally. So I would say to not go to bed for about to not have a meal closer than 3 hours to your bedtime, which is it's roughly about that. So about 3 hours to empty your stomach. And that's really for chemical, mechanical reasons. It's not necessarily a huge player. But if you do have insulin sensitivity issues, then you need to experiment with it, because you have two possibilities. One is that you're eating a lot of carbs before bed and you're getting a fast rate of change at some point due to sporadic insulin releases and sensitivities, bounce. It's not like a volume knob. I'd skip that. Don't worry about what I'm saying. If you get your blood glucose too high with sort of fast things that have what we call a high glycemic index, meaning that they raise your blood glucose really quickly, they also come down really quickly. Well, you can get that response that I was talking about, right?
Okay.
And then the other thing is that if you're just really low carb, or again, if you have sort of unpredictable insulin sensitivity and your blood glucose gets too low, an absolute nadir of like being too low will also trigger your brain in the same way. So I usually tell people, if you think you have any issues around that, try some slow carbs, like stay away from starches, stay away from refined carbohydrates, because those go up and down really quickly. Get yourself a bunch of broccoli or Brussels sprouts or asparagus or salad or something like that, and load yourself with some slow releasing carbs. Some fruit, blackberries, blueberries, that kind of stuff. Slow releasing carbs, so then throughout the hours of the night, your blood glucose level will stay high enough, and it will come down at a gradual level.
Okay, nice. Moving on to the next question there. I'm not sure how to say this. I think it's Aura Ring, the OU.
Yeah.
Aura Ring.
Yeah.
He wants to know how you feel about the Aura Ring. He thinks he already knows what you're going to say. So let's see if we can prove him wrong. But
I think it's probably pretty predictable. So the wearable devices. Well, let me first say this. Of all of the wearable devices, I believe that the Aura Ring is the most accurate, and I believe it is the best designed and probably the easiest for compliance. And that's primarily because the charge lasts so long, because it's a ring and not a watch or chest band or whatever other kind of gadgets people do things on their heads, headbands, and all that other stuff. It's just an easier thing. So and in full disclosure, I'm good friends with Harpreet, the founder of the company. But I do want to throw in a caveat about it. If you want to have a sleep tracking device, then I would say yes, that's probably the best one to have. The reason for that I could go into if anybody's interested, about why its design is superior to others, in my opinion. But I caution people to know why you want that data. A lot of this biohacking kind of mindset, people are just collecting data for the sake of having data. and then making uninformed and uneducated opinions about what that data means, and then trying other things and collecting more data. And it just seems like a nightmare to me. So what I tell people is if you feel like you really need that data for compliance around sleep or heart rate variability or whatever you're using it for, as long as you know why you're using it, and then personalize that to you. And what that means is the Oura Ring, although I believe it's the best and the most accurate, it still is running an algorithm, and it's this idealistic algorithm of this percentage of your sleep should be this, and this percentage of your sleep should be this, and the step and the progression through that the night should be this, and then you can get a score of like you 100%, you have a great sleep night. But that might not be your best night of sleep. That's just the algorithmic best night of sleep. So you need to find out what your best night of sleep. And might be 80%. Like an 80% score might actually be when you get the best sleep and you feel the best and you perform the best. And if you're going to use it for other things, I know a lot of people use it for heart rate variability as well. Just know why you're doing it. And what's your exit strategy? Don't get too wound around the axle with this stuff. And there's a point where the information just isn't useful anymore. When you start worrying about what percentage of your sleep is slow wave sleep, and what percentage is REM sleep, and what percentage is light sleep, and you can't do anything about that anyway. So let's not get too crazy with it.
Okay. How do you feel about the blue light blocking glasses? Are these good or bogus or?
Yeah, so I actually see that. That ages me. So when I first started my sleep lecture, the last slide I gave people a bunch of resources to do things to help them improve their sleep. And a lot of it was sleep hygiene stuff, and some of it would be things that people now call biohacks. One of the things was glasses, but nobody made blue blocking glasses for the purpose of blocking blue light yet. People made gaming glasses, and gaming glasses were there to decrease the eye fatigue when people play video games, because blue light's the most diffracting, and so you get rid of the blue light and it's easier to focus. And so I told people, just go buy these gaming glasses, go down to your game shop and buy these gaming glasses, and they work. Now, the technology is more sophisticated now, and it definitely works. So super quickly, the way we all evolved, as I was saying, every mammal on this planet uses the sun as its cue. And the way we evolved is when the blue light leaves our eyes, right? It has nothing to do with light in general. It's when the blue light leaves our eyes. We have some nerve cells in the back of our eyes that sense blue light. And when the blue light goes away, my guess is because the sky is blue, when the blue light goes away, that triggers our brain to say, oh, it's time for us to start getting ready for sleep. And that's, that actually it's those neurons, those nerve cells in the back of our eyes that are sensing blue light that slows them down. They have less blue light to make them fire. So when they slow down, that causes the pathway to go all the way circuitously back through our brain and our SCN and all this, and it eventually triggers the pineal gland to start secreting melatonin, and melatonin is like the starter pistol of the sleep process. And then you start getting all these biochemical changes in your brain. And then about 3 hours later, you feel like falling asleep. So most people have experienced this when you go out camping. If you go out camping and you don't have a bunch of electronic lights with you, most people find that they fall asleep about 2.5 to 3.5 hours after the sun goes down. That's because it's how long it takes your brain to do all this processing to get you ready for sleep. Now, nobody spends 2.5 to 3 hours getting ready for bed anymore. So one little thing that you can do to simulate that is wear blue blocking glasses. Use light bulbs in your house that don't have blue light. Have the F-Lux on your computer to take the blue light out of your screen. There's apps on your phone to do the same thing. There's things you can do to your smart televisions that do the same thing. Get the blue light out of your eyes. And like I said, it's not absolute light, it's blue light. So if you can get rid of the blue light, you get the same benefit as if you were living in your ancestral environment and getting ready for sleep the way you evolved to get ready for sleep.
Nice.
And I actually have just penned a deal with Swanic blue blocking glasses. I've known the founder of that for years, and they make a really good product. And so on my website this month right now, as part of our Valentine's sale, I'm basically giving my commission as as an additional discount to anybody who buys them from my site. So I'm not making any money off of them, and the commission I would make, I'm just giving that discount to the customer. So if any of your listeners want to buy some glasses there, that's as cheap as you'll ever be able to get those.
Oh, nice. And we can just, Kirk, at the end of this, text me anything you want in show notes. Like any type of links, like links to your website, like any kind of stuff like that. That way people can find it pretty easily. Don't have to like kind of look back through the show and try to remember something. Another question from Bradley. Actually, let's take another question from someone else, and we'll come back to Bradley's questions. Brittany asked about people that are working like 24-hour shifts, like first responders, and how. And basically, her understanding is that, people that work these 24-hour shifts, when they try to come down off that and get their sleep back, there doesn't seem to be any way to really do that. Do you have any tips for dealing with that scenario? And are there any supplements that could help them to deal with that scenario?
Yeah. Well, I commend Brittany on her intuition. This is something I usually have to sell the first responders, is that there is nothing that you can do to get rid of that pain. What you can do is mitigate against some of it, but you're born into this contract. That you don't have any say over it, just like you don't have any say over whether or not you're going to die eventually, or gravity is going to affect you. And this contract basically says that after being awake for 16 hours, you need 8 hours of sleep to repair and recover and be ready for tomorrow. Now, if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, tomorrow still comes, and you'll figure out a way to get through it, but you won't be fully recovered and you won't be fully repaired. You'll be slightly damaged, and you'll start to decay, and that's what we call aging. And so if you think about it, a kid not only repairs 100%, a kid repairs 101%, 102%, right? And they wake up the next day better, faster, stronger, taller. And then at some point that plateaus, and then it starts going the other way. And you wake up at 99%, and 99% of that, and 99% of that, and then that's what we call aging. And so when you're doing something that forces you into chaotic sleep cycles or just sleep deprivation, you're doing that to yourself. There's nothing you can do to reverse. There's nothing you can do that doesn't make that true, right? That's the 2 + 2 is 4. There's nothing I can tell you that's not going to make that true. However, what we do know is that, and it's pretty logical if you think about it. So if being awake for 16 hours, and these are loose, right? I don't want anybody to set stopwatches on this. This is a rough concept. If being awake for 16 hours leads to 8 hours of sleep, and that's sort of the ideal 24-hour day, then what happens when you're awake for 18 hours? Even though you sleep 8 hours, right? So if I work 18 hours a day instead of 16 hours, and I still sleep 8 hours, I'm still not going to recover 100%, right? Because it takes 8 hours to recover from 16 hours. Now, if I stretch that out to 20 hours, to 22 hours, to 24 hours, to 30 hours, what am I doing? I can't recover from that, right? I need 2 nights of sleep, essentially, but I'm not going to be able to sleep that long because of circadian rhythms and ultradian rhythms and other body systems that are going to prevent me from sleeping for 24 hours after I get off of a 30-hour shift. And so I'm a little damaged, and I'm not quite recovered. And I'll figure out a way to compensate, and I'll figure out a way to not decay so fast, but I am going to decay faster. So the keys to it is basically, health it's a series of decisions, really. It's pretty much all lifestyle decisions is the key foundation to health. And I used to say that there were 4 pillars of health, but now I say there's 3 pillars of health sitting on the foundation of sleep. So it's, think of sleep as like that's the granite bottom that the pillars are sitting on. And then you have exercise, You have nutrition, and then you have stress mitigation. So you can call that mindset or psychology or mindfulness or whatever you want to call that. But you have to control stress. You have to manage your nutrition, and you have to manage your activity and exercise. You need to do those three perfectly,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because sleep is the foundation, and that's the one you're robbing yourself on. So you need to be better than everybody on those other three.
I see.
And then some simple things that we can do um, is like one of the things that we know is that, and again, if you think about this, it makes sense. If I say the longer you're awake, the more damage that you're doing to yourself that you aren't going to be able to recover from with 8 hours of sleep, the obvious solution is to reduce the number of hours that you're awake. So what a lot of people who are first responders and shift workers do is they have this shift where when they get home in the morning after their night shift, that's their time with their kids. That's their time with their family. And so they're going to stay awake for another 4 or 5 hours, and then they're going to go to sleep around noon, and they're going to sleep till 7 or 8 p.m. And then they're going to get up and go in again.
Mm-hmm.
That's the wrong answer. And it's an unpopular truth, but you need to get your sleep as soon as possible.
I
So
see.
if you can go to sleep an hour after you get off work, that's when you should go to sleep, if
Mm-hmm.
that's your primary concern. And then the other thing is that um, you have to almost treat that like a disability. You have to treat like this is a special circumstance. There needs to be accommodations made for the fact that you aren't getting enough sleep on a chronic basis, and that is killing you. That is going to make you
Mm-hmm.
many times more likely to contract any disease and to die from any cause. Sleep deprivation does that. It just does. Shift work does that. We know it does that. Shift work is a type 2A carcinogen. So what we have to do is make accommodations for that. So as unpopular as it may be with your wife or husband, you need like your own little special sleeping room that is ice
Mm-hmm.
cold, that is silence of the lamb dark, that is quiet. And when you go in there and sleep, nobody ever disrupts you, because that's right. You're trying to compensate for this tragedy that you
Right.
do to yourself every day,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody who cares about you should want you to be able to do that. And so I tell people, if you have a little study or office or a big closet, I don't care, like something that you can make cold and really dark, and put a bed in there, and make sure you're really comfortable, and wear earplugs if you have to, and
Mm-hmm.
get in there, and you get your sleep as soon as you possibly can, and you sleep the best you possibly can. Now throughout the day, you can take phosphatidylserine.
Mm-hmm.
Phosphatidylserine decreases cortisol levels. It decreases the stress hormones in your blood. And when you don't get enough sleep, you end up with higher stress hormones. And stress hormones are catabolic, meaning that they take complex tissues and they break them down into simple tissues. Anabolic is the opposite. When you take amino acids or eat proteins that get broken down into amino acids, and then you build muscle out of that, that's anabolic. When you're starving, your body actually eats that muscle to break it down to get amino acids, and that's catabolic. And so stress hormones are catabolic. That's what makes old people, shrink and lose their muscles and lose their bone mass and stoop over and all that. That's what that process is. So if you take phosphatidylserine, like you're going to run around with high stress hormones if you have chaotic sleep. One, two, most people with first responders have a pretty physical job,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're going to have more stress hormones from that. And then they're in a stressful job, right? I mean, it's first responder.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So these people are just going to have higher stress hormones. That's, again, higher catabolic activity. So take phosphatidylserine during the day. My sleep supplement actually has some phosphatidylserine in it, just to like help you make sure that it goes down low enough to
Nice.
to help you sleep at night. And the other thing is just to monitor all of your blood work, and
Mm.
make sure that your micronutrients are spot on as well. Work with a functional medicine doctor and make sure that all your micronutrients are where they should be. And again, like, just, you need to be super diligent with your nutrition, super diligent with your exercise, and super diligent with your stress mitigation.
All right. Well, that was awesome. Like that's a great, interesting thing. What was it called again? Say it nice and slow for me. I'm like terrible.
Phosphatidylcholine.
Yeah.
Tidal,
Uh-huh.
T-Y-D,
Phosphatidyl.
T-I-D-Y-L, serine,
Serine.
S-E-R-I-N-E.
Okay. Phosphatidylserine. Okay. I just never heard of that before. That's like first time I ever heard that word. So
You won't really see it used for that, but there's research on it for doing HIIT training, and they established really clearly that when you do super high intensity exercise, one of the things that you get is big, obviously, lactic acid flush, and you get subsequent stress hormones and excess cortisol, which is counterproductive to the workout you just did.
mm,
And they found that giving phosphatidylserine decreases cortisol buildup during that phase, and it decreased lactic acid as well, and improved lactate threshold. And so I just extrapolated that out and said, I bet you that'll work for sleep too. And then I started giving it to the seals for sleep. Then sure enough, it helps. So.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. Cool. Well, I'll put the plug into anybody listening. You can pick up Doc Parsley Sleep Remedy here at our gym. Besides finding it online, if some people just like to just roll into a place and pick it up, you can always get it here at our gym. I feel like we should probably start to call here. I wouldn't mind doing this again. I actually have a whole slew of other questions that I would like to get into my own, but we got through most of Bradley and Brittany's questions here, and I think we'll have a chance to do this again. I think at some point. So basically, I'll tease everybody, but I would actually like to talk to you about meditation and sleep and kind of what I've been teaching meditation for like 20 plus years. I think when I started, there were a number of studies that people used to talk about, and I'm probably still using those a little bit here and there. And I'm kind of curious where the science has gone from there because I've spent absolutely zero time looking into that. I just meditate, but yeah, I'm very curious, like how with a relationship to sleep and everything. But I will say this: I'll throw this on the record. Since your talk here at the gym, I have gotten 8 hours of sleep every single day.
Right
Sometimes I
on.
had to break
That's
that up.
impressive.
Sometimes I had to break that up. Sometimes it was like 6 hours. I had to get up, get the kids to school or something. Then I'd come back. I'd lay down for another 2 hours. But just it's made a huge difference. I mean, just running the gym, I put in so many hours on the mat that I really try to just prioritize everything I do rest wise, everything I do recovery wise, because SPG Texas doesn't run very well if I can't go to the gym. So like that's
Right.
that's just a reality of our business right now. So I'd like it to be different eventually, but that's just where we're at in our growth phase. So
Yeah.
I take it pretty seriously.
Yeah. Well, I'm always willing to come back.
Cool.
It's easy to get me to talk about sleep.
Sure. Yeah, I'm excited, and I'm excited to see you back at the gym training when you come back from Florida and everything. So
Yeah. About another month would be good.
Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Kirk, and we'll be in touch. And send me some notes and all that people can look at real quick. And take her easy, dude.
All right, man. Sounds good.